Hey, so, first up in the Lore of a Township Tale series is the Kolmui. These guys are a major faction that had a hand in most, if not all, of the major events we know of so far. But, before we get into that, a few quick disclaimers. Due to the nature of how we get the lore, this video could be inaccurate or incomplete as soon as the next cosmetic rotation, or it could be perfectly up to date 6 months down the line. Also, the lore is almost entirely speculation, with all of it up to individual interpretation. What I'll be presenting in the video is my understanding of the theories and concepts, but it is not absolute. I would suggest going and reading the lore board yourself. Lastly, if you haven't seen my original lore video that goes over the general timeline of the lore, I'd suggest you watch that before this video. With that out of the way, who are the Kolmui exactly? Why are they so important? Well, the Kolmui are the ancient people that built and lived in the town that we see in the game. As for why they're important, it's as I said, they had a hand in most, if not all, of the major events we hear about. So, let's go over those things and how the Kolmui are related, as well as any additional information we have about the Kolmui themselves. Firstly, the creation of the town. At some point in the past, the Kolmui either invaded or instated the township. In my original video, I said that I don't believe that this is an invasion, but given the translation of the name of the town, my opinion on that has changed somewhat. Basically, I think that the Kolmui were the ones who created the town, but it was, in itself, some sort of invasion. My main evidence is, as I said, the translation of the name of the town. The town is named Kolmui Loki, and without getting too much into the old tongue, as that'll probably get its own video later on down the line, it translates roughly to Community Beyond the Stars, Spear of Natural Places. I'll get to the Kolmui, or Community Beyond the Stars, part later, but for right now, let's focus on Loki, or Spear of Natural Places. Basically, what I see this to mean can be broken up into two parts. Lo, meaning spear, and ki, meaning natural places. For Lo, I see this as meaning that it's the forefront of the Kolmui's development, or alternatively, the tip of their advance into the land the game takes place in. For ki, I see this as meaning the area that the town was made in was originally much like the forest, with trees and hebios everywhere. This lends credence to the theory that the Kolmui created the town, and in doing so, invaded an area that was not originally theirs. The diplomatic relations between the Kolmui and the surrounding peoples is obviously involving the Kolmui, and my theories regarding it haven't changed much since the original video I made, so we'll skip over it. Again, the surrounding people sending envoys to the Kolmui is obviously involving the Kolmui. In my original video, I said the envoys were sent as a result of something the Kolmui were doing that could cause catastrophe. I believe that this is the ritual, which will probably also get its own video later on down the line. When it comes to the soul power that the neighboring peoples asked the Kolmui about, while we still don't know for sure what it is, I believe it to be reincarnation. If we go with the theory that the players are in some way descended from the Kolmui, that would make some pretty decent sense. Additionally, it would fit in with the rest of the lore surprisingly well. If the soul power is reincarnation, then it'd be a reasonable assumption that the ritual was creating phantoms. This is further supported by the fact that they're literally immaterial, immortal ghosts. Then, the envoys coming from other civilizations to stop what the Kolmui were doing would also make sense, as we know that the phantoms eventually became quite dangerous and hostile. Next, the Big Bad. While we still have very little information about it, we can assume that it's a result of what the envoys were trying to stop. On top of that, if you agree with the theory that I posed about the Kolmui's soul power and the ritual, then it would make a lot of sense that phantoms becoming hostile was the Big Bad / the event. Also, if we follow along with that theory, it's not too big of a leap in logic to say that the Goteras, Tarabatas, and any other creature we see in the future that seems to be an animate version of a normally inanimate object is a result of a phantom fusing with that object. Last in the list of the major events are the Blight Rippers and the Seekers arriving. While we don't know this for sure, I think it's safe to say their arrival is a direct result of the actions of the Kolmui. The strongest evidence of this is the fact that they're not mentioned at all up until the point at which they arrive in the land, after which all hell breaks loose. The easiest explanation I can think of for this is teleportation, as we know the Kolmui possessed teleportation of some kind, which makes use of crystals and some specific liquid. How do we know it's the Kolmui who have teleportation magic, though? Well, the Artificers, a sub-faction of the Kolmui, are thought to be responsible for basically all of the magic and tech that makes direct use of the crystals, and everything we see in-game that uses teleportation has crystals as a part of it. That's every major event on the timeline, and how the Kolmui are involved in all of them. Let's move on to information about the Kolmui themselves. Interestingly enough, we have very little information on the Kolmui outside of their actions, and what we do have is specific details about individuals within the Kolmui. But I'd be doing a disservice to the lore to not go over those things. So let's get into it. We know that there were charismatic leaders who held the people together in times of crisis. We know that the township had a tradition of sending out young adventurers to journey into the land to gain experience. We know that, at some point, the township was racked with disagreement and contention, causing people to grow distant from one another. We know that there was a subsection of the Kolmui who protected something, quote, deeper in the town than the people. We know that people were aware that the night held dangers. And lastly, we know that there was, at some point, a declaration of war. Who this war was against is still unknown. Beyond all of that, we basically know nothing. Earlier I mentioned the Artificers, and while we don't have much information on them, it seems that while it was considered taboo to practice in such things, it was a necessary evil for the town, as their services were commonly required. The last thing I want to talk about is the name of the Kolmui. As already mentioned, the town is named Kolmui Loki. This could mean multiple things about the name given to the Kolmui. The first possibility is simply that the founders of the town chose to include the name of their civilization in the town's name. The second, and I think more likely possibility, is that the Kolmui were not originally called that, and only gained that name because they come from a place called Kolmui Loki. The last part of the name I want to mention is the translation of Kolmui, community beyond the stars. Unfortunately, this name itself sheds very little light on the Kolmui themselves, as Mui, or community, could just as easily mean the people as it could the place. As for Kol, I have no idea what that means. Beyond the stars, the closest thing we have to reference to that is a mention of fear of the moon in one cosmetics description, but I doubt that has much to do with it. That said, if we take it less literally, beyond the stars could simply mean that it's far from their homeland, further helping the theory that the Kolmui are not originally from the land that the game takes place in. Well, that's everything we've got about the Kolmui. If you have a different interpretation or theory about all of the information and what it means, or if you have some information that I missed, leave it in the comments section below. Also, let me know what you think of the new style of background footage. Should I keep using it for future lore videos, or should I go back to my normal formula of standing in one place and talking to the camera? Lastly, if you have a weapon you want me to review in a future episode of Weapon Review, the link to submit that is also in the description. But, with all that said, I'll see you around.